The other thing you can get ready is just mixing up your colors. The gamboge we're going to use again. The imperial purple we're going to use again, or whatever purple you mixed. We're going to use ultramarine. Some opera pink. Using French ultramarine, so...
You are using French?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, that's what I like. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're going to be using indigo again today. And then the only other color you need to mix is a orange, unless you have the Quin Sienna. Mix some puddles, or the new gamboge or gamboge, the imperial purple, or a nice purple, which would be ultramarine and Quin Rose. Ultramarine in a separate puddle, indigo in a separate puddle, pink if you want to use the opera pink. Probably don't need a huge amount of that. Ultramarine, and then an orange. So you can mix your orange with Quin Rose and Hansa, or if you have Quin Sienna, it's a beautiful orange. Because we want it to stay wet as long as possible. So this way the paper is completely soaked through, and we're going to have more working time. That's the main reason. Sometimes the other way you can do this is you can wet both sides and let it sit for, let's say, 15 minutes. And then you can take a paper towel and dry it off if you need it to be dry enough to work with. So there's all kinds of options for that. Yeah. And I've got some buckling myself. Sometimes it helps to actually wet the back again. And the other thing you can do is, if you have a brush like this, you can press pretty hard in order to straighten it out. But if there's a lot of paint in that area, probably not a good idea. In my case, where it's buckling is right where I'm going to do the mist in the background. So I'm not too worried about pressing too hard in that section. What we're going to do now is we're going to do our mist. So we're going to do this part here. Here I did it with ultramarine and the imperial purple, which I like better than this. This one it's too reddish. Doesn't look very good. So it's in the background. It's going to be kind of bluish, and we want to basically do a roller coaster shape, right? We don't want it going straight across. We want to go up and down and have the, eye go up and down on that. Now the question is there paper wet enough to do that at this point? So what I usually do is I look at it, and if it's really hard to tell, then I'll just take a little bit of paint on my brush, and I'll do it right at the edge, and immediately I can tell that my paper's not wet enough in order to do that. So I'm gonna wet it again in that area, and I'm just gonna go in the shape that I'm gonna do my mist. And you might go a little bit further up and down from where you're going to go, because you don't want to find a hard edge there. And can everyone see that on the TV? Kind of. So my shape, I'm going to start over here, and I've just got my ultramarine blue, and I'm just doing a little bit at a time and each time I'm doing the reflection at the same time so that I can keep track. Now this reflection is, the horizon line is way back here, the mark that we made. So this reflection is actually, the middle of it is that mark that you made on your paper over here. So that's just something to think about. And you just keep going across, making your roller coaster.
So you're using ultramarine?
And imperial purple. So the two colors mixed together. I'm using an Escoda 12, which has a really, really fine point. So you could even go to an 8, you know, something. And make sure you don't repeat the shape too much. You want it to look different. So if you do a roller coaster, you know, just, yeah, purple and ultramarine blue, but very faint. There's not a huge amount of paint there. And then I'm just going across here. I don't want the shape to look too contrived. So we might have to make some adjustments if we don't like what we see there, but this is a good start anyway. And then add a little bit more ultramarine as you go along. I'm using a Escoda Perla 12.
Oh, okay, same brush as me?
Yeah, I love these brushes. Yeah, so this part of it is actually going to, one part of it is going to go right into the island. But, you know, something like that shape is not so bad. And then some of the mist actually comes down a little bit. So you can do some marks where it looks like the mist is coming down. And then that's got to dry a little bit. I've got a bit of a puddle here, so I'm just going to get rid of that. Sometimes it helps to turn your painting sideways. Yeah, in the middle there's not much at all. If I turn this around, maybe it's better to keep it on the board. Okay, and if you don't have enough white in the middle, you just take a clean brush, wipe it off on a cloth or whatever, and just go right along with that brush and wipe out the paint that you've got there. Okay, so since our paper is still pretty wet, what we're gonna do is we're gonna add some dark to this island or whatever we want to call it. And I'm just going to test it at the side and see how wet that is. It's not really spreading at all, so I know it's not wet enough, but rather than wetting the whole paper, I'm just going to wet my island. So this is basically the second layer on our island. If you haven't done it already, you can just start with ultramarine and indigo. And I'm doing the actual island, so not the reflection yet.
We're just doing the second layer.
Second layer on that. And here I'm adding ultramarine and indigo. The other thing you can do is, if you see a sun ray coming down, you can kind of be conscious of that.
Your camera isn't showing on the...
Not really. No, once I start fiddling with the camera,
Uh-huh.
it does weird things. So can we see that? Yes, we can. Okay. All right. So I'm just filling in the island with some darker color. I'm not using a huge amount of paint here either. And then where it's yellow, it might turn green. And if it does, you can add a little bit of pink there and just, you know, brighten that part up. And then you can even put a bit of orange into that. But just let your colors blend by wetting the paper a bit and then letting them flow into each other. And then at the bottom, it can be darker with the indigo. We'll eventually make some lines in this. You can start making some lines if you want. So you can see how the rock actually flows across. And my island goes up quite far here, maybe a bit too far on mine. So I might just soften this part here. This is all going to be quite dark over on this edge. Up there, let me turn it around and show everyone.
Okay, that makes sense.
So basically, we have indigo at the bottom, we have some ultramarine blue. If it turned green, I added pink. And then at the top, we have a bit of orange. The orange is really just to show where it's glowing from the sunlight.
What do we make orange again?
And then here I thought, you know what, this is really not the focal point, and it's very dark. Why don't I just concentrate on the very end of the branches, what it would look like, put a very dark color in there, and then wash it out. And I like this one the best, I think, because it's, you know, you have to have some lost edges in, well, you don't have to, but it's nice to have some lost mystery in your painting. And so that's kind of the goal we're aiming for here when we do this trees, which is our next step. Here I did them mainly with purple and indigo. Here I did them with some green and ultramarine. Well, I actually mixed the indigo and gamboge to create this green, which was a new mixture for me. I really liked the way that ended up looking because you could gradually make it, you know, more and more orangey as you go by adding more orange into the indigo. But those are our options. I'm going to paint this. If you're painting this one, make sure you leave plenty of gaps towards the top. So these white spaces that are there. Either one is fine, and then after we finish this part, we're just going to wipe it out so that you get these sun rays shining through that. So we're going to need some ultramarine and some indigo ready. And just make sure you have enough of that. Some good sized puddles so that you don't run out. As we get to this part of the sun, we'll gradually put a bit more water on it and kind of mist it out so that it starts to be misty towards that sun.
Just so you know, when you're like showing us, we can't see over here because your head is there.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, did you follow that though?
No.
No. Okay. So, the point was this one I drew individual trees.
Right.
This one, I did a mass of trees with lots of gaps in between, and I used the indigo with the gamboge to do that green. Here I just used indigo and imperial purple, and I concentrated more on the tops of the trees, what they might look like, and washed out the rest. So that's what we're going to try to do. Now at this point, this is probably almost dry. It is pretty dry. So I'm going to use a spritz bottle to wet this area, but I'm going to cover my sun, because at this point I don't want any water on my sun. And I'm not worried about spritzing this part of the island. That's fine, because those trees are almost blending right into it.
So my paper feels still really wet.
Does it? Let's see how wet it is, because everyone's is going to be different. Oh yeah, that's pretty wet. So you might not need to spritz it. You can do a little test. You just off on the edge to see how wet it is. That looks great. Yeah. Okay, so now let's put some color on there and see what happens. How's that? Okay. So I'm just dotting them in.
And again, those colors are,
That I'm just using imperial purple, but I'm going to add,
or gamboge and indigo.
yeah, or gamboge and indigo. And this is really the top of the trees that I'm working on at this point in time. And I want some gaps in there. So make sure you have these, if you use a spray bottle, it should leave little gaps that you can see spaces in between. And that's going to help you do these trees. Now I'm mixing a little bit of indigo because I'm going darker as I go down here. But I'm not going too far over right now. I'm not going into the orange part yet. I'm just trying to cover this area. And you might even need a bit thicker paint as you work your way down here. So for your indigo and your ultramarine, you might want to mix it a little bit thicker. So that's what I had before. Now I'm adding a lot more ultramarine to that to get a nice thick mix, because I want it dark on this side. So it's thicker than it was. And
So ultramarine and
ultramarine and indigo. And then some of that purple might also be dripping down as well. Now I've got too much of a slant on my paper, so I'm just gonna move it up a little bit. And this is going to blend right into the island that we just painted.
So those colors again are
Indigo,
and
ultramarine, and then a bit of imperial purple. More at the top is where we put the imperial purple. So you should go right down to your island and let the paint just merge into your island. And now we're going to add a little bit of orange to our indigo. So what I do is I just put it on the side, and I can decide how much I need of that. You could even put a little bit more gamboge in it if you want it yellower, because we're going to make our way towards that sun. And as we get closer to the sun, it takes on this orange color. And you can mix that with the indigo. And the indigo and orange start to create a bit of a green hue in a way.
Mine always looks black.
Let's see. Oh, in your palette, it looks black, yeah. So you could add a little bit more yellow, maybe, Lori, but I would use gamboge, not lemon yellow. Okay, so as I get closer to the sun, if I spritzed before, and now it's dry, which is happening to me, I need to cover my sun again, maybe even with a cloth, and spritz around there. So I can get closer to my sun with that paint. And if you mix a bit of that orange with your ultramarine, it will also create kind of a greeny shade. So every once in a while I'm going back into where I already painted and just putting that in. And just look at your paper and see, is there drips there? If there's drips, you can continue painting. If not, then you should give it a little spritz. And make sure you have some gaps there in between the trees. So if you're adding more paint in, add it where the gaps are. Okay, if you want to come up and see what it looks like, that might be helpful because I can't really tilt it at this point.
Just want to have a look how you're doing that.
Yeah. So I'm just dibby-dabbing.
Oh, okay.
And I'm making sure that the color
Oh, yeah.
kind of gradually gets...
That's ultramarine?
That's ultramarine,
And
indigo,
Okay.
and then I mixed a bit of that orange into it too.
Okay.
And at the top is all the purple.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Okay.
You're good at teaching.
Oh, thank you. All right. If some of your drops are too big, just take a paper towel and just take some of it up. So it's really kind of a gradual change of color. But before we do that, we have one more thing that we're going to do, and that is we need to get these rays coming down. So if you have, I find this brush works well. Your paper still has to be wet though. If it's not wet, then you may as well wait until, well, yeah, good question. If it's not wet, I guess you can wait to the next layer. But basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go from my sun and I'm gonna wipe across this whole area.
With a dry brush.
It's a damp brush, but I'm wiping it off on my cloth.
Oh, that's a wet grocery?
Yeah, it's wet, but as I'm wetting it and then I'm wiping it off. And it's a good idea to have some variation in the wipeouts. So if you do 1, 2, 3, 4 all spaced nicely, do one in the middle or something so that, you know, it doesn't look as, I guess, contrived is maybe the word. I didn't do a lot of rays going up this way. I find they look better if they're going down. And if your island was still wet, you can actually scrape out some of those rays right onto the island. It is a clock, so the ones that are right directly below are going to go down. You know, every ray is going to mimic the way a clock would look.
Are we just doing one side or are we going?
I'm just doing one side. And then we'll move to the other side, and then once this is dry, we will define this edge here that we just made with the purple. We'll define that better. Over here, I'm not going to have as many trees. I don't have a lot of space for one. But I'm going to repeat the process that I did, which is basically to cover my sun. And then spritz around. And just a reminder, your spritz bottle has to leave big droplets. If it leaves a puddle, it's not going to work that well. You want to see big droplets. So practice on a piece of paper or something black first. Because if it's all a puddle, then you don't get this nice effect of it moving into the droplets.
Indigo and gamboge.
Indigo and gamboge, yes. Yeah, not indigo and orange. So it should create kind of this kind of color here. It's kind of a very wintry green or something, I don't know. Yeah. But also,
Oh, you've got a, is that it?
yes.
Oh, I'm going to have a grey green.
Yeah, it's kind of almost like a gray, green. You don't want it too bright. A little bit, yeah. So maybe a little bit more indigo and a little bit, that kind of this green. So let's see how, now if your spritzes are still there, then you're ready to go. This tree here, I had leaning over a little bit. So maybe at the top, it's, you know, your windswept pine. Can everyone see that? Yes, okay. And not evenly spaced. You can draw a thin line if you want to see how.
That's indigo and gamboge.
Yes. So if you're spacing your branches out evenly, then you have to go back and make them uneven. And then as this tree moves towards the sun, it gets more gamboge and more orange in it. And that kind of blends in with the green. If you got droplets that are too big, take your paper towel, dab them out. And we will do one more layer so your tree doesn't have to be the darkest dark at this point. You're just identifying where it is and doing that graduation of color. Okay. So it's gradually getting more orange, and I think I'm going to add one more tree in there because I do have some space for it. And I've got too much water on my paper, so I'm dabbing some out. And I'm not too concerned with where the trunk is yet because the paint flows all over the place, and I can draw the tree first and then figure out where the trunk should go. So I've got 2 trees here. And now I'm starting to add more orange again. And then you can even add some just pure gamboge, but make sure it's not too bright. And if you want, if the yellow is too bright, if your gamboge is too bright, you can always add purple. I think purple is a solution to almost anything. Okay. I got quite a lot of flowing down here. Okay, let that dry. The other thing to look out for is just really hard edges on certain things, so just double check, and if there's any, just soften them with a brush. Yeah, because if it makes a puddle, then everything just mushes together, right? Which is also not so bad. I mean, yeah, it has a different effect. And If you let it dry, if it mushes together like that, and you come back, you can make some of the other edges harder. So with mine, I'm turning it upside down because it's dripping the wrong way. It's all very soft right now. But I can come back in and define some other things. It's kind, and then we can define, you know, 1 or 2 branches just around the edge. Yeah, these are good wipeout brushes. You sell them fast. Yeah. Yeah, if your paper is dry, the wipeout's not really gonna work. It has to be pretty wet in that area for it to work.
Yeah, it's wet now, but it's,
But the other paint is already dried. Yeah.
well, pretty much.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can.
It's challenging. When I was booking this, Deborah said to me, "Oh, I put it in as a beginner course," and I said, "It's not. It's intermediate." But you know, everyone can learn a lot from just this technique. But it is not the easiest thing to paint. It's really a lot about water control.
So we don't put sun rays on that side.
Well, I just did a couple, but not as much as we did on this side. Just a very faint amount. And then we're gonna let that dry a bit. And if we want to define the trees on the left-hand side a bit further, it's dried enough that we can actually go in here.
So you can't see.
Kids.
Move it over.
Ah, okay. It's dried enough over here that I can actually see a little bit. So to try to match the color a bit, but you can put in some well-defined edges over here. And then just join them down to the rest of the tree. So you're still going to leave some gaps, but you're gradually blending it in with the color of the rest of the tree here.
I'm using my golf hammer. Remember the golf course is closed.
Okay. And then the other thing you can do on this side is just put a few branches in. A few trunks.
Using ultramarine and indigo.
Pardon me?
Using ultramarine and indigo.
Yes. And a bit of the purple, because I had the purple up at the top. And you can soften where it joins the other part, just with a damp brush. So that's probably good enough for that side. This one for me has to dry further. I'll start over here where I didn't spray as much. You can just define these more if they've blurred out. And then mixing that orange with the indigo makes a nice brown for your tree trunks. And you can do your tree trunk skinny first. And where they join the rock, just soften them up so they don't look, they look rounded. With the little gaps in between the rays, you can also put in more definition, trunks, things like that. So yes, not a lot more on the left-hand side. And then you can look at closer to your sun. Do you need more tree shapes closer to that? Or leaf shapes, I guess, more accurately. If it's too dry like mine is, I'm gonna steal my spray bottle back. Then we can give it a little spritz. So some of these trees really close to the sun, you can bring in with some orangey color or pinky color.
Oh, yeah. Very well.
Now what we could do is take a break and then we'll do the bottom half, which is essentially a repeat of the top. A little bit more faded out though than the top. So it's almost like a second chance to do it. They're clean. Now, it's not going to work that.
It's not one of those that you clean the sink with, is it?
Yeah, or your walls or whatever. And I just buy them at the dollar store. But they have to be the ones without Febreze or anything in them. And then if you've lost your white, well, sometimes it's better to cut it. I don't have a cut. You just scrub it.
Scrub it?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then bang, my white is back.
Oh, I'm off. I'm gonna go
forgot
and
to
try
bring
that.
mine. That's good for using
Yeah.
for rays, right?
Yeah, and actually you could try doing rays with that. Let's see.
'Cause my
I don't
rays
know
are
if it,
It's
messed
fine
up.
enough.
So you don't have to wet it.
you wet this.
Oh,
Yeah, you don't, you could wet the paper, but, I think it makes,
And you could do it there more. I'm not.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying you can.
Yeah,
I meant I could. Wow.
yes.
Mr.
Yeah.
Clean, I'm on it. I'm on it.
Mr. Clean, and look how nice and white it comes back. My paper towel's dirty, but,
can I try a piece of yours too?
yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
It's an essential for watercolor painting. Mr. Clean.